The Westpac challenge of being chief economist in such an extraordinary organisation was hard to knock back. I thought it was going to be a short-term appointment while the recession was on. 30 years later, I haven't regretted a minute of it.
This is a recession that Australia had to have.
Two recollections from me. The first one was that it was brutal for Westpac. Westpac was massively exposed to commercial property. The other point I think I remember about that recession was that it went on and on and on. Very different to what I think is going to happen with the COVID recession, where we'll bounce out very rapidly as we have been recently and will again. This one went on and on and on. It was called the jobless recovery. And for me, the turning point was December 1993, a good 4 years into that recession, when Summerant said,
"The winner is Cindy."
And we won the Olympics, and our consumer sentiment index took off by 15%, and we got out of that recession so quickly. And I think it was that boost in confidence that we had at that time that played a major role.
So well deserved, Ray.
1997, Southeast Asia's rapid economic boom was overheating.
Asian crisis, a very, very interesting time. We could see that it was emerging. The Asian economies were attracting a massive amount of capital. It was going into speculative assets such as property developments, and they weren't prepared to cut the capital off by letting their currencies rise. So it was clear that something really bad was going to happen. Around about that time, I was on a marketing trip in the Northern Territory. And I was meeting with the Chief Minister. He told us how that part of Australia was critically aligned with Indonesia and Asia. That night, I spoke at a dinner which was on the lawn of the MGM Grand Casino, beautiful weather in Darwin in August. And it was always going to be a tough gig, talking to a group of people that are out on the lawn, plenty of beers, plenty of drink running. So I started to talk and I realised I had no hope to really get the attention of these people. So I thought I'd fire my big bullet, which was to say, hey, I know how exposed you are to Indonesia. There's going to be a massive crash. There's going to be a crisis. And I still didn't get any response. So I decided I should sit down and enjoy the party. Companies were being valued not on their profits, not on their revenue, but on the number of subscribers they had signed up. So it was a crazy time. It started in 1996 when the equity market was starting to lift. And Chair Greenspan said that this is representing irrational exuberance. And we all went, wow, what a strong statement this is. He's going to raise rates. But he didn't. He raised rates by 0.25% between 1996 and late 1998. And in the middle of a booming equity market, he cut interest rates by 0.75%. And that just sent things off.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
All I can say there is that I had a massively important presentation to a range of really important customers on the morning after 9/11, and I had this presentation prepared. I walked into the presentation room and said, well, I prepared something here for you, but none of it will matter for anything now, so let's just have a chat. It all started for me in 2005. When I was visiting the US, and I had the privilege of having a meeting not with Chair Greenspan, but someone very close at the Federal Open Market Committee to Chair Greenspan. And I remember telling him that I was starting to get worried about the booming housing market in the US. And I was telling him the experiences that Australia had had with booming housing markets and how they can bust and generate some problems for the economy. And he glared back at me and he said, Mr. Evans, you don't understand the US. We've never had a housing bubble that's burst right across the country. We've had isolated problems, but we've never had one right across the country. But of course, that's exactly what happened, and it was the bursting of the housing bubble that laid the foundations along with the extraordinary financial engineering that was going on for the GFC. Around the European crisis, I'd been visiting my customers in Europe, and it became fairly clear to me on that particular visit that the European financial system was far from healed. So when I came back to Australia, that was really sticking in my mind that the world was a long way from recovery. It was also clear to me that the inflation fear that the Reserve Bank and other economists had was way overdone. But the Reserve Bank had raised rates from 3% to 4.75%, and the general rule was that they had a lot further to go. So when we argued that no, they won't raise rates at all, indeed they'll cut rates by 100 basis points, we really did create a stir around the market. And one of the factors behind that was what I learnt about the European financial crisis.
In Australia, as it is changing all around the world, life is going to continue to change as we deal with the global coronavirus.
Oh no, we never expected to see the economy contract by nearly 8% in one quarter, and we're predicting another 4% contraction in the September quarter. And I don't think I ever expected to see growth of 9.6% over a year. So no, we haven't ever seen anything like this. Those crises that I've talked about in the past, all of those have largely been associated with two factors. Firstly, policy mistakes by the policymakers, and secondly, asset bubbles. COVID is totally different to that. In COVID, it's been a necessary health response from the government, holding down people's preparedness to spend. And so those sorts of growth volatility that we're seeing at the moment, no, we haven't seen that before, because we haven't seen circumstances like this before. I had an academic background at London School of Economics and the Reserve Bank, but I'd spent about 10 years in the markets, and for the last 6 of those years I was Director and Head of Financial Markets at Schroders, which is one of the big 3 investment banks at that time. The earliest memory was the shock in terms of the different culture. So I'd come from an investment banking environment where everybody was out there for themselves, and I came to Westpac where the culture was a lot more about teamwork, and about the big picture. I've made a lot of calls. There's a lot of stress in this job. There have been times when I've made some bad ones. There have been times when we made some good ones. I suppose the one that does stand out was the big call we made in 2011 when the market was going one way and we said it would go the absolute opposite. We were the only voice making that argument, and indeed it turned out to be correct. So that has to stand out. Sometimes you have to say what you think the right policy is, rather than what you think is going to go around the table.
It's obviously impossible to describe Bill Evans in one word, but if I had to choose only one, it would simply be legend. A remarkable economist who can relate to the titans of business, while relating to the battler in the bush over a cold beer or a red wine.
What's the big challenge ahead? I think it's very low productivity that we're facing at the moment. I think we also have to deal with the challenges around the global warming issues and, of course, the level of household debt. There are challenges all around that Australia is facing, but we're not too different to other countries. It's about business investment, it's about good policy, and it's about deregulating and making it easier for business and for households to move forward. What a fantastic privilege I've had. It's an incredibly interesting job. You've been at the centre of all these massive global events. It's never boring because there's always another one around the corner. There's always a challenge. It's been a great ride. I've enjoyed it, and I hope there's a bit more of a ride left in me.